All right, I have started the recording. Let's start. The floor is yours.
Okay, so my name is Tisha Naidu, and me, Janavi, and Shreeya, we have all created a brochure for parents for tips of how to deal with their kids when they experience model minority. So essentially, okay, so just imagine being labeled as superior in academic fields solely because of your race. I know that might seem nice, but this is the result of implicit bias and racial stereotypes. Model minority myth is the product of the stereotype in the communities. Model minority, the label is a stereotype that generalizes Asian Americans, depicting them as a perfect minority and well off. One example is that several Asian American students have been presumed to be good at math because of their ethnicity. According to reports from FISE.org, Americans and people around the world have carried a stereotype that Asian students are the model minority in math. It is believed that Asian students are strong in math, and the Asian students struggling in the subject don't get enough support because of this belief. Similarly, they're deprived of opportunities for scholarship or admission because it is assumed that the Asian students are well accomplished and don't require any special assistance. It is also thought that Asians don't face racial discrimination and biases in comparison to other ethnic minorities like African Americans or Hispanics. The recent hate crimes against Asian minorities is worrisome.
What is model minority? In short, model minority is known as a label to minority groups that have achieved an elite level of successes and has been a common label for Asian Americans. The concept of model minority can be found in a 1966 article in the New York Times Magazine by the sociologist William Peterson, which focused on Japanese Americans. However, the basic fact was extended to other Asian Americans. Some may ask how these myths have been created and why Asians are targeted by these academic and social stereotypes. Historically, the label was created during the climax of the Civil Rights Movement. Asian Americans were known for their strong work ethic and were used as a tool for white supremacists to create a wedge against Asians and were commonly praised for their hard work and achievements. This claim was also coined by William Peterson, a sociology professor at University of California, Berkeley, in the New York Times paper, saying family structure and hard work led to Japanese Americans overcoming discrimination and achieving success. This meant that the Japanese were able to achieve what they wanted as immigrants due to their hard work ethic. Similarly, other Asians coming from Southeast Asia had similar experiences in the late 1800s and early 1900s. After the Exclusion Act halted most immigration from China, North American employers in need of laborers turned to India. Among other places, this facilitated the migration of skilled and professional people to America. Today, our world is filled with doctors, engineers, and its professors from the Indian subcontinent. The success of these immigrants is a combination of right values and work ethic. People from the Indian subcontinent were family-oriented, education-oriented, and work-oriented. Quotes from the model minority. People will have this really weird presumption that, oh, she's smart because she's Asian, and I feel like it's a head start. Many people don't realize, however, that stereotyping Asians as smart and hardworking can put pressure on Asian students to live up to the unfair standards of academic excellence that others put on them.
All right, so we're going to move on to the interview section where me, Tisha, and Shreeya decided to do interviews on people we knew. So Tisha did an interview on her brother, who's a junior in college and attends UW-Madison. And he has experienced several schooling systems in India and America while his friends are pressuring and being all like, oh, well, you don't have to study because you're Indian, or you're so smart just because you're Indian. and he realized that through school and college that because of his race, he's expected to be smart than he's expected to be. And it's not seen as like a big accomplishment because of the standard. He's also witnessed that the immigrant community has higher degrees of education because then the chances of being accepted into the country is higher. His experience in Indian schooling systems were very different from the American schooling. First difference being, in India, everybody is expected to be at a very high level and be at the top of their class. In America, you just have to try your best and it's accepted. But India has much more higher standards for students. Then I myself decided to interview my mom, who is an associate professor in the Department of Medicine at MCW, and she's among many Asian Americans that work in that very hospital. But she has a lot of experiences related to the model minority myth. And one of them that she had told me was about when she encountered one of her medical students, JJ, who was an Indian American and had been very stressed out over a project. And he had explained that he comes from a family filled with doctors and that he was pressured to go into the medical field. So basically this narrative from the student basically suggests that Asian Americans who internalize the model minority myth show higher level of psychological distress like JJ and negative views of help-seeking behaviors. And therefore MMM, also known as model minority myth, against their best interests, and they are unable to advocate for racially colorblind policies. Then Shreeya decided to interview a friend of hers who had told her about the past experiences in the model minority at her school. So basically in her science class, her teacher wanted to explain something to the class that she had previously taught. And she felt like her teacher was being harder on her because to other kids, and Snehi felt like this was because she was Asian. And that made her feel stressed out because she hadn't learned the topic yet. And the teacher was calling on her more than the other kids. So she wishes that teachers hadn't had similar expectations from her as they did from other kids. Although this is like a kind of small thing that's usually overlooked, she hopes that one day model minority isn't such a big thing, just like all the other people in.
Okay, so moving on to the impact of model minority and what that does to young kids' mental health. So according to Joanna Corpus, and she's from the It Gets Better project, and they kind of like focus on like kids' well-being and stuff. She claims that I felt I had to hide my real emotions due to the pressure I felt to maintain an image of faultlessness. While these social pressures perpetuate a culture of silence, the familial and community level expectations drawn from these can create even more barriers to help seeking. These societal demands can often mix with familial ones, including intergenerational trauma. Intergenerational trauma can stem from first-generation immigrants' experiences like many of us, especially if they were fleeing conflict or experiencing racial discrimination. The impact of these experiences from the ways they cope to the outlooks they have on the world can be passed onto their children and their children's children. And that is from the that like promotes mental health issues such as like depression, anxiety, and suicide, and a lot of those like conditions need like therapy, and we just like don't want to get at that like stage, and that's why we're here today. And some steps for parents to combat model minority myths is number one, psychological and emotional support from parents. As a parent of Asian American children, there are several responses to what their child wishes to pursue. However, your own wishes for your own child may be completely different to theirs, and this needs to be understood. Like Dr. Cha talked about during her experience knowing JJ, his parents should have been respectful towards what he wanted and needed. If his parents hadn't pressured him into the medical field, the mental health and psychological pressure of JJ would have been declined, and him and many other Asian American students would have had the ability to pursue their personal wishes and choices. Number two, we have to increase awareness about MMM or model minority myths in the community. Number one is to challenge stereotypes. This entire presentation has been about how a lot of people in the Asian American community have been pressured into, oh, you're so smart, you don't need to worry about school. We just want to stop that because that's what leads to a lot of kids having depression, anxiety, and possibly suicide, and we really don't want that. We need to understand the differences between each kid and their growing state. We need to push kids into a growing mindset, and kids will grow at their own time. We just want like a steady growth mindset. And we, as parents, I feel like me and my group, we want kids not to feel pressured when they learn, but obviously pushing your child to study and be better for them, better for their future is always good, but just know when to like stop and be kind about it is kind of what we're saying. We want to raise awareness of history and like experiences of AAPI and people of color, essentially just showing your kids about somebody you grew up learning about who like fought a war, or like an old king, or just like somebody who was brave and put their country or their beliefs before, and not worrying about their color or what others like think of them. Kind of just like when children see somebody of their own kind, it feels nice, and they're more likely to continue studying and just being braver in general. And we also want to get our kids to learn about Asian American leaders. Like I was saying before, it's just seeing somebody who's like you, because I mean, we've all like grown up in like America, or like been around many American traditions, and we don't want to get too influenced by that. We want to stand our ground, be Hindu, and like keep with our beliefs. And it's nice seeing somebody that looks like us, and we can be proud of our own people.
So to wrap up this entire topic, we decided to create a page of a bunch of words and different quotes that describe model minority in a nutshell. So kind of, I don't know how to say it, but in this like word bubble, you're talking about all these words that are usually mentioned in model minority myths, such as your academics have to be perfect, you need to reach this standard if you're Asian, it affects children of all people from the Asian continent, and like minority groups are affected, and people from different cultures are being have like people have different assumptions about them, and like in order to be an Asian American, you need to be perfect. And this is one quote that we really liked, which said, Asian Americans must be careful not to become convinced of the model minority myth, lest we become complicit in the oppression of other groups. So that concludes our topic of the model minority myth.
Excellent, excellent. Any questions from the parents or anybody else?
I just want to, this is Pinky here. I just want to add that this is a huge problem going around Asian American group, especially I can talk about medical field. And I'm so proud of these kids to choose such a topic which exposes our vulnerability and touches upon things that we all as parents are dealing with. So even with that tender mind, tender heart, if they have poked our head to think about it, I think I take it as a great achievement. And I really like how they put this complex topic in such a beautiful, simple way that even lay person can understand. So kudos to the team. Just wanted to say that, no questions.
Any other questions, comments? All right, let me stop the recording.